The train screeched to a halt at the dusty little station, sending up clouds of grit into the hot prairie air. Among the handful of passengers who stepped down onto the wooden platform was a young woman in a faded blue dress, clutching a small suitcase to her chest. Her face was pale, her eyes wary, and beneath the fabric of her sleeves, the outline of dark bruises peeked through. She looked broken, exhausted, yet determined to keep standing. And standing there at the edge of the platform, watching her with quiet intensity, was a tall, solitary rancher whose eyes carried their own kind of loneliness. The moment their gazes met, the world seemed to pause. He did not ask about her past, did not question her pain. He simply stepped forward, placed a protective hand near her shoulder, and said the words that would change her life forever. "You're coming with me." If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the healing power of love, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to The Gentle Truth for more emotional and heart-touching stories. The woman, her name Clara, had not come west by choice. She had answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride, not because she believed in romantic promises, but because it was her only escape. Back east, life had been a cage, a cruel family who used her as little more than labor, and a suitor who had treated her not as a future wife, but as property. The bruises she carried were not just on her skin, but etched deep into her soul. Yet when she saw the rancher, his name Thomas, standing steady and silent, she sensed something she had never known before: safety. The ride back to his ranch was long and quiet, the wagon creaking over rough trails, the sun dipping low behind the hills. Clara sat stiffly, her suitcase clutched tight, every jolt of the road reminding her of the pain in her body. But Thomas did not push her with questions, did not pry into the shadows she carried. Instead, he offered her silence, and in that silence, she felt the first fragile threads of trust begin to weave between them. The ranch itself was sprawling but lonely, a place built with hard work but lacking warmth. Thomas had lived alone for years, burying himself in cattle and fences, never daring to hope for companionship. Now, with Clara beside him, the emptiness of the land seemed a little less heavy. At first, life on the ranch was not easy. Clara struggled to heal, both in body and in spirit. Nights were restless, filled with the echoes of her past, and even in daylight she flinched at sudden movements or raised voices from the ranch hands. But Thomas was patient. He worked beside her, not above her. He gave her space when she needed it, and offered quiet presence when words were too heavy to speak. Slowly, Clara began to find her strength again. She found it in the way the horses nuzzled her hand, in the warmth of fresh bread baked in the kitchen, in the wide-open sky that no longer felt like a prison but a promise. Weeks turned into months, and Clara's bruises faded, though the scars inside took longer. Yet with each passing day she grew more herself, and in her laughter, tentative at first, then freer, Thomas found a healing of his own. For years he had believed that life had passed him by, that loneliness was his lot. But in Clara's courage, in her determination to rise above her pain, he found hope. Their bond was not built on hurried promises or fragile illusions, but on something deeper, on survival, on respect, on the slow rebuilding of two broken souls into something whole. The greatest test came one evening when Clara's past returned. A figure from the east arrived at the ranch, a man who had once claimed her as his. His words were sharp, his threats cruel, and for a moment, Clara's strength wavered. But Thomas stood firm at her side, his voice steady and his stance unyielding. For the first time, Clara saw that she was not alone, that someone was willing to fight for her, not to control her, but to protect the life they had built together. It was then she realized the truth. She was no longer the bruised, broken woman who had stepped off that train. She was stronger now, braver, because she had found a place and a man who gave her not just safety, but dignity, respect, and love. By the time winter snow blanketed the prairie, Clara and Thomas had carved out a life together. Their days were still hard, filled with work and challenges, but they faced them side by side. What had begun as a desperate escape became something she never thought possible: a home. In his quiet strength and in her growing courage, they found not just survival, but joy. And though the land around them was harsh, within the walls of that ranch there was warmth, healing, and the promise of a future worth holding on to. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to The Gentle Truth. Your support helps us continue sharing stories of kindness, resilience, and second chances. Special request: comment below which part of Clara's journey moved you most. We'd love to hear your thoughts.